أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As promised, inshallah, today we'll start off with the first chapter of Awaarif-ul-Maarif. Before I get into the first chapter, I would like to just give a quick overview of the preface. That's the introduction by the Sheikh himself. That will give us a quick idea as to why he wrote this book, right? So basically, in the preface, he says that he says a very beautiful thing. He says it's almost impossible to recognize Allah or God. So it's almost impossible for us humans with our limited intellect, limited physical capabilities, and the limited capacities we have to recognize Allah, right? Because he's unlimited, he's infinite, right? So it's not at all possible. However, it's a great blessing from Allah himself that he has given us the guidance or the way towards him, right? And this guidance is actually through his praise, right? So this praise is again revealed through the Quran and the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. And he says that this praise of Allah, if you start praising Allah, that actually leads towards love for him, because it's a known thing. The more you praise someone, even in our life, in our worldly lives, if you look at some in our worldly relationships, if you start praising someone, you start talking about the good qualities, the good aspects they have, it leads to this feeling of goodness towards them or liking them, right? So that's what he's trying to get at over here. And the other thing he says that this praise leads to love for him, and once a person has that love for Allah in his heart, that actually leads to the special nur, this nur from Allah in the heart that actually then allows you to recognize him. So this nur then makes it easier for you to recognize Allah, right? So praise for Allah leads to love for Allah, and then love for Allah leads to this nur in your heart, which in turn allows you to recognize your Lord. Okay? Then the other thing is the important aspect he talks about in the preface is the purpose of the book. He says the book is his attempt to help those who are actually trying to improve their spiritual condition, right? And they want to do it in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah, right? They don't want to be distracted with other means or other mechanisms, because let's admit, spirituality isn't everything, right? It's whether it's just looking at a beautiful landscape or music or whatnot. You know, there are things that people associate spirituality with. However, the purpose of Awaarif-ul-Maarif or Islamic spirituality is that spirituality that is in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And that's what actually is what is interesting is Imam Ghazali, may Allah be pleased with him, also says in his book Kimya Saadat, The Alchemy of Happiness, that if you look at spirituality, spirituality is like the ocean, right? And Tassawwuf, or basically spirituality is the ocean, and the Sharia or Islamic Sharia is a boat on which you embark on the ocean, right? You just don't go without a boat on the ocean, because either you end up drowning or you get tired or you just come back on land, right? So you won't get anywhere. So you need a boat, and that boat is Sharia. So within the confines of the boat, you go upon the ocean, right? So that's the essence of what the Sheikh is trying to get at over here as well. And the other thing is the second aspect of writing this book is he wants the readers to be able to distinguish between what are authentic Sufis and what are fake Sufis. So even in his day and his age, there was this issue, which he also expands on in later chapters in the book, right? So now let's get into well, actually, there's one more thing I want to talk about in the preface. He talks about Sheikh Junaid Baghdadi. May Allah be pleased with him. He was a great master of spirituality. In fact, he's known as one of the pioneers of spirituality, or Islamic spirituality. And he refers to a statement that Sheikh Junaid made, where he said that in their day, in their time, which was, I think, it was almost 300 years before Sheikh al-Shuyukh. And he talks about this fact that we right now are, Tassawwuf right now has been wrapped up. It's just been wrapped up, put away. He's talking about his day and his time, Sheikh Junaid's time, right? So keep that in mind. This was almost about 300 years after the Prophet's passing away. And so he says the Tassawwuf has been wrapped up, and now we're just involved in debates around the outskirts of the Tassawwuf, or the boundaries of the Tassawwuf, right? So imagine, he's referring to his day and age time where, again, knowledge of Islamic spirituality and acting upon Islamic spirituality, or even being interested in Islamic spirituality, is just now, it's just a by the way thing. And so Sheikh al-Shuyukh says, imagine 300 years ago this was the condition of the Ummah, and now how worse it's gotten. And now we, almost 1,500 years later, now need to think about what's happening around us, right? So that's why it's a big mess when you look at Islamic spirituality, and it's very hard to distinguish between what's right and what's wrong, right? So now let's go on with the first chapter. So the first chapter of the book Awaarif-ul-Maarif is focused on the purpose and objective of Tassawwuf, right? So the Shaykh actually opens up with a beautiful hadith from Bukhari, right? He narrates two hadiths, which are, the first one is, and I'm going to literally translate this because I feel it's really relevant to our discussion over here. The first one is, Allah's apostle went out, and when he had ascended a Safa mountain, he shouted, O Sabaha, right? So this is the hadith where you would have thought about it, where he went up the mountain, and the Safa mountain in Mecca, and he called upon everyone and said, well, if I tell you that there's an army coming from behind this mountain, it's going to attack you, will you trust me, or will you believe me? And they said, yes, we would, of course. And so that's where the Shaykh used that hadith and says, the Prophet, peace be upon him, came as a warner, right? So he said that the example he used was the army, because if you listen to him, you'll be saved from all the destruction that the army might cause. You might be made a prisoner, or you might be dead. So whatever the state might be, the surety is in the fact that if you listen to his warning, you'll be saved, right? And then he goes on, and he goes on and says that he talks about the second hadith in Bukhari, which is, the example of guidance and knowledge with which Allah has sent me is like abundant rain falling on the earth, some of which was fertile soil that absorbed rain water and brought forth vegetation and grass in abundance. So that's the first example. Another portion of it was hard and held the rainwater, and Allah benefited the people with it, and they utilized it for drinking, making the animals drink, or irrigation of the land, right? And then there was a portion of it that was barren, which could neither hold the water nor bring forth vegetation. That is, gave no benefits, right? So the first is the example of the person who comprehends Allah's religion, right, and gets benefit from it, which Allah has revealed through the Holy Prophet. And then he learns and he teaches others as well, right? It's the cultivation. So basically either the cultivation is going to produce crops which people feed on, bring use of it in their lives, and the second is actually the land that holds the water, so people can drink from it, people can wash themselves. Again, both are benefits, right? Even they can use the water to irrigate and bring out crops, right? So these two, the first two is the example of knowledge and guidance, right? And which you benefits yourself and others as well. The third one, which is the barren land, he talks about this last example, is that of a person who does not care for it and does not take Allah's guidance revealed through me. So basically, just the rain fell on the land, nothing happened, no cultivation, it didn't hold the water, just, the water basically went away. Or as you see a hard rock, when rain falls on a hard rock, it just, flows over. And the rock just gets a bit wet, but then at the end it just dries up, right? So that's the example of people who actually have heard the Prophet or have the knowledge in front of them from the Prophet, but don't make use of it, right? So he then goes on and uses these two hadiths, and he says that the hearts of people of knowledge are like lakes or ponds, right? So they benefit everyone either for drinking, for cleanliness, for washing, or whatnot, right? And so he goes on to explain that this knowledge, these people of knowledge are like the ulama. So you've got the ulama of the Quranic sciences, which you call the mufassirin. You've got the ulama of the singular prophet, or the muhaddithin. You've got the people of the fiqh, right, who understand whenever there's new issue facing the Muslims, they try to resolve it within the teaching of the Quran and the Hadith, and if there's nothing found in there, then with what closely basically what is in line with the Quran and Hadith, or which not negate the Quran and Hadith, but is in line within the boundaries of the Sharia. So those all are scholars, or the people of knowledge, right, that he's referring to. But he says there's an important characteristic of any person of knowledge, that they're not concerned with worldly wealth, fame, or status. What concerns them is benefiting people, right? They're doing it for the sake of Allah only, right? So they're doing it for the sake of Allah only, and they have no personal agenda on it, right? So that's an important characteristic. And then he goes on and says that no matter who comes to them, they benefit from them because they're like, again, the pond of the lake or the river, right? They benefit everyone. They don't really care if that person is a sinner or a saint or a close one or a far one or a Muslim or non-Muslim. They try to benefit everyone, right? And then he says the first and foremost source of ilm or knowledge and guidance is actually the Holy Prophet. And why is that? That's because he was directly blessed with knowledge and guidance from Allah, right? No one else can really claim. I mean, only the prophets can claim that they have been directly taught or directly given knowledge and guidance from Allah. The rest of us humans actually are Muslims. We actually follow the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. So we then have to rely on him, right? He is our foremost source of knowledge. If we need any knowledge around Islam, we go to him. The Quran was revealed to him, and it was his through his word, through his mouth, actually the words of Allah were revealed to us, right? And then the hadith, of course, because his own sayings were what he said. So these two important sources come from the Prophet, and so the Prophet is actually the source of our knowledge and guidance. And then he says again, the Prophet is then like the ocean, right? He's the ocean of knowledge and guidance through which the rivers flow, and then these rivers become lakes and ponds, and people get are satisfied their needs. So these ponds and these lakes are those people of knowledge then, because they're taking this knowledge from the Holy Prophet. It's coming from the Holy Prophet. It's nothing new, right? It is from that. That's the source. And then that's where he makes an important point in this chapter. So this is actually the most important point perhaps in this chapter, which talks about tafaqquh fi din, or striving to understand and learn religion, right? That's tafaqquh fi din. So he says this is a prerequisite for tazkiyah. So when someone starts making the effort to understand and learn religion, they gain knowledge. Once they gain knowledge, they start practicing and performing good deeds. Because if you know, only when you know how to do it will you do it that way, right? So that's what happens when you start learning about religion, when you start understanding what your religion really wants from you, what's the purpose of this, then you start practicing it. And when you start practicing it, or performing good deeds, that's when that's when they get marifa, right? So, and what is marifa? Marifa is actually recognition of Allah. It's the state of being God conscious or being aware of Allah all the time, right? And this is like the end goal of the Tassawwuf. That's what he says. So the starting point is the tafaqquh fi din, having that that zeal or that interest or that feeling in you that pushes you to start understanding your religion, right? Understanding Islam, understanding what's the purpose, what's the essence, why does Islam want you to pray 5 times a day? Why does Islam want you to fast in Ramadan and all that, right? So that's the prerequisite. You start off with that, and then leads you on to the journey of Marifa, where ultimately you get to the point, which is the end goal, and that is that 24/7, every moment, every breath, you are aware of Allah. You are God conscious in the sense that whatever actions you do, whatever thought you have, ultimately there's Allah in it, right? It's for the sake of Allah, and you're always thinking about Allah, and that's the goal of tazkiyah. That's the goal of Tassawwuf. Okay. Lastly, he explains in this chapter that he's using the word Sufi in this book, but it actually he's referring to the muqarrabin, right? So he says the Quran uses the word muqarrabin or muqarrabun in some instances, which is people who are close to Allah or near to Allah, right? And that's the right word to use. But because in his time and age, and even now as well, the word Sufi is used more commonly. So that's why he's using that, so that it's easier for people to understand that and relate to it. However, he puts in a disclaimer, and he says that when I say Sufi, or when I use the word Sufi, it actually means the Quranic Muqarrabin or the Muqarrabun. I'm not referring to those Sufis. Again, he says I'm not referring to those Sufis that are just acting like Sufis, right? Now are fake Sufis, or are children of Sufis, right? So we see that a lot, especially for people from India and Pakistan. That see that you have these shrines where there are a lot of people, they claim to be from the children of, or from the progeny of the saints that are buried in the shrines, and then their own actions are not in accordance with Islam, are in accordance with what the teaching of the Tassawwuf or Islamic spirituality. So then he in his day and his time, that was also a problem. It was an issue as well. And so he said you just can't call them Sufis, or can't put them in the same categories as those that are the Muqarrabun, right? So to conclude, and to just give you a quick gist of what this chapter or what he was trying to achieve through this chapter, was that the objective of the Tassawwuf is to establish the Marifa of Allah, which is a state in which a person is aware and conscious of Allah at all times. And the starting point of this journey is having the characteristic of making the effort to learn and understand religion. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا